All right, y'all, we back at it. The testimony of Pedro Flores, part two.
But you later learned who that was, correct? Yes. Who? Chapo. So you tell Lupe I'm not turning over my warehouses. What happens next? So I begin. I continue to pay off my debt and try to square out our business that we had pending. And then he summoned me to a meeting in Zacatecas and told me, if you want to fix things, and he wanted to get back to business. What happened at that meeting? Well, I drove to Zacatecas with my wife and my worker, Ashley. That day I got this bad feeling, and I asked my brother to meet me at the spot where Lupe was at, and there's going to be no phone service. So he picked up my wife and my worker. So when I arrived, my brother was waiting for me, and he took my wife and my worker, and I seen Lupe and his son, and they greeted me, and I went inside the house to speak with them. Where did your brother and your wife and your worker go? He took them home. So you're now in the house with Lupe? Yes. And some other people, and what happens? It's about maybe 10 minutes into our conversation, he has a bunch of men there with him, and I hear a loud bang, like a flashbang or something, and I see about 20, 25 armed men coming through the back of the house and yelling, "Federal police, everyone down," which surprised me, and they came straight at me and began to beat me with their rifles, put me on my knees, stripped me to my underwear, and handcuffed me and began to blindfold me, which I thought at that moment we're all being arrested because he kept telling me you're going back to the U.S. Where did they take you? That day they took me to somewhere like in the mountains, and how did you know that they were taking you there? They put me in the back of a truck. I felt they put me in the back of a truck. I felt how bumpy it was. They went off road to the mountains and they had me just sit out there till about 4 in the morning. And they put me back in the truck and drove me to some kind of like little room, like a jail cell with like a bed in it and metal doors. Did they take off your blindfold? No, they never took off my blindfold. How long were you there in jail? They handcuffed me and bandaged my feet. I was practically laying in that bed for about 15, 16 days.
My understanding
What
was it was
happened?
21 days.
I lost about over 30 pounds. I got sick. It
I
was pretty
guess it wasn't.
traumatic. I thought I was going to die, and it's an experience. And
Yeah, they weren't prepared. He wasn't the type of hostage that they were just gonna feed and treat well and not. We're just gonna keep you alive. That's it. Right above the threshold of life. That's it. Again, I'm sure his organs are still suffering over that experience.
on the 16th day, what happened to you? They eventually put me back in the trucks and they drove me for like 30 minutes, and somewhere like in the middle of the highway, they stopped and they transferred me to another vehicle. This time it was like a squad car, like a federal police vehicle. Were you able to see at this point? I could see glimpses. I could see under my blindfold that it was a black and white squad car. Where did that squad car take you? They drove me for another about an hour, and then I felt the car like go off the highway and into like a bumpy road and took me out of the car and walked me a couple of steps. I was still blindfolded and handcuffed, and he kicked me in the back of my knees and put me on my knees. At that point, I felt like it wasn't even more worth for me to beg for my life. I just thought it was going to be over.
If you recall, this is where they took him out on the road. It was dark. He walked all the way down the road, all malnourished, skinny, stankin', in pain, basically dying. Walked down the hill, thinking he was gonna see somebody or get some type of phone signal. Got down there, he got nothing. He had to walk all the way back up. Got a little bit of signal, got his brother on the phone, and then they started using their twin telepathy to find each other, and evidently it worked. Peter saw his brother off in the distance coming down the mountain road, flashing his lights and explained to him how far away he was, and then they basically had to play it by ear until he got saved and rescued by his brother Jay.
At that point, I felt like it wasn't even more worth for me to beg for my life. I just thought it was going to be over. I felt them put something in my back pocket, and then he handed me a piece of paper. He whispered to me, he said, "You're lucky, your brother saved you." And he
If you remember, the way Jay saved him was he went to go see Chapo. He went to go see Chapo on the mountain to basically find out where this $10 million debt came from. Peter and Jay were both under the impression that Lupe was also kidnapped with them. They didn't realize till later that Lupe is the one that actually did the kidnapping and had Peter kidnapped himself.
said, "I'm putting this handcuff key in your shoe." He said, "When I leave, I want you to count to 100 and don't get up and don't turn around until I leave." And then what happened? I counted to 100 like he said, and when I came out, I reached for the handcuff key and managed to take the handcuffs off, and I reached for the phone he had placed in my pocket, which, lucky for me, had a flashlight on it. It was like a cheap Nokia phone with a flashlight, and I was so weak. Man, I could barely walk, so every couple of steps I would have to sit in the middle of the floor and just rest. I finally got some phone service, and I was able to call the number when my brother answered. You say the floor. What do you mean? You said sit in the middle of the floor? I was sitting on the ground, man, just like I could hear the wildcat around me. I hear, it was pitch black though. Where did you go? I finally made my way back and found myself on the highway, and I was able to contact my brother, and I would still be hiding from the cars that were passing by because I was pretty messed up. I didn't want to bump into like a cop or something and he sees me in that condition, and how were you able to get out of that situation? After I called my brother, I was kind of lost where I was at, but I could see across like the open valley. There was like a cop car with the strobe lights on. I could see it, and I could see it follow the kind of zigzag of, like a snake road down a mountain. Yes, down the mountain. I see cars going up and down the mountain, and I recognized it from a road I had taken plenty of times. So I told my brother, just take a chance, man. See if you come. See if I could see you. He says, look it, I'm going to call you when I'm on that road. So I'm going to flash my lights, and I'll put my hazard lights on. Let me know if you see them. So it took him about 30 minutes, 30, 40 minutes, and then I finally was able to see him. He was
Crazy.
shutting his lights off and on, and I seen his hazard lights on like from far away across the valley onto the next mountain, and he eventually found a way to me. What did he say when he saw you? He said I stink, and what else did he tell you? I gave him a hug, and he told me that he had met Chapo Guzman.
Now don't get it twisted. Chapo did not broker Peter's release at all. Chapo's stance was that's your problem. Somebody owes me 10 million. You figure out how to get your brother, how to do all that, you go get them the money, but the debt is still owed. You pay the debt, you get your brother.
He told me that Lupe had set everything up, and how did your brother fix this problem with Lupe? He had met with Chapo, and Chapo heard him out, and that he sent some of his guys with my brother to speak with Lupe, which then he told me that Lupe had slapped the shit out of him and was yelling at him, but the guy that he sent with him had a recording device in his pocket. Which guy who had sent? That Chapo had sent. I was instructed to go to Culiacan, Sinaloa. Let's start with the first part of that trip. You get to Culiacan. Who do you meet first? I meet Herman Olivares and Omar Wiwi. Wiwi, did you say? Yes. Who is Wiwi? He was a worker for Zambada, Mayo Zambada, somebody they had running around for him. Did you later have a conversation with Wiwi about what he did for the Zambadas? Yes, besides running around doing errands, I believe that later on he began to involve himself in the drug business as well. So Wiwi and Olivares take you somewhere. Where do they take you? They take me to a compound where I meet, among others, Mayo Zambada. Let's talk about who else was at that first meeting with Mayo Zambada. And where was this compound? In Culiacan, Sinaloa. Who else was there when you first met Mayo Zambada? There was a lot of people there that you can remember. Vicente Zambada, Juancho Guzman, Olivares, my brother, me, and Tomas Arevalo. I want to get you back to that first meeting with Mayo and all these individuals in Culiacan. What did Mayo Zambada say to you about what had happened in the past? Well, we discussed the drug business, and he had said to me that he believed that we sold over 20 tons of cocaine in that time period. What did you say back to him? I argued back to him that it was less than that, maybe 15, between 15 and 20, maybe were accurate. And what was his response? Well, he got up from his chair and began to tell me how he had personally sold drugs in LA, New York, Texas, and Chicago, and told me he was familiar with the little village where I'm from. The little village area in which city? In Chicago, and he'd sold drugs there himself. Then he said to me that, and there's a bunch of people there, he said any one of those idiots could sell tons of drugs in Mexico, but very few could do it in the United States like that. He got up and shook me and my brother's hands, and he says, you guys have my respect. Congratulations. Then he laughed and said, imagine if you guys were triplets. What did you take that to mean? That we'd probably be doing a lot more than we had already done. Did you and Mayo Zambada at that time talk about what you might be doing in the future? Yes, during those meetings, I felt like I took the chance and asked if me and my brother we could continue to work with them on our own behalf instead of through another middleman. Another middleman such as Lupe Ledesma? Yes. What was Mayo's response? He got up from his chair again and said, "You know what? You guys have earned it," he said. I said, "You're right." And he told me, "You can get work from me." And he pointed at Olivares and Juancho. They were there. He said, "You could get work from him or him. It's the same thing," he said. "From now on, I'm going to give the same prices as I give to my top lieutenants. And you guys are my people, man." And he got up and shook our hands.
Came up. I believe the episode was called At the Table. That's the meeting they had with all the bosses where they told them they weren't comfortable with just working with anybody. I mean, look at them. They at that point they had already been kidnapped by Lupe. They weren't trying to risk themselves dealing with just anybody in the organization. They wanted to deal with the top tier guys.
Any work at that time frame, that meeting? Yes, immediately I seen Juancho and Olivares speaking with each other. I heard him saying some numbers. I have 300, I have 200 something. He said something to Mayo, "Do you want to some cocaine now?" I said yes. I heard they took over the conversation. They said that they had over 500 something kilos sitting in Chicago right at that moment. Was that first shipment successful? Yes. How do you know? Because I distributed to my workers and paid them back for it. You distributed it to your workers? I mean, to my customers. Approximately how much did you make on that first shipment? After that first meeting, I ended up paying $1,000 cheaper than I paid before, so I easily made over $1.5 million that first shipment. Just on that first shipment alone? Yes. Over the next few years, did you receive other cocaine shipments from Chapo and Mayo through these two gentlemen, Juancho and Hermano Olivares? I continued to receive cocaine from them routinely. With whom did you coordinate from May 2005 until you turned yourself in November 2008 to receive Chapo Guzman's and Mayo Zambada's cocaine loads? With different people, including Juancho and Herman, Vicente Zambada, Alfredo Vasquez, Damaso. What about heroin? Did you have someone who distributed heroin on behalf of Mayo Zambada, an individual that you met? Yes, Felipe and Alfredio. Who is Alfredio? Chapo's son. Do you know any other names for him? Alfredo Guzman and Salazar. I'll show you Government's Exhibit 16. Move into evidence, Your Honor. You're moving it or it's in? No objection. Received. Who is this individual, Government's Exhibit 60? That's Alfredo. You said he's the son of Chapo Guzman? Yes. You mentioned someone else, another name, Damaso? Yes. Who did you meet Damaso with? With Alfredo. What did Damaso do with you? He also plied me with cocaine. Do you recognize Government's Exhibit already in evidence 11A? Yes. Who is that? That's Damaso. What did Damaso do for Chapo Guzman? To my understanding, it was like Chapo's right-hand man. And specifically, what specific things did you observe that he did for Chapo Guzman? Help him coordinate certain drug shipments. Over the next few years, did you receive any drug loads from Damaso? Yes. Approximately how much? No more than 500 kilos.
That's nothing.
Is that one time, or how did you come to be introduced by Alfredo Vasquez's aka compadre? Through Chapo. For what purpose? I was looking for a money courier. Someone helped me bring money down from Chicago. To where? To Mexico. Did this individual, Alfredo Vasquez, did he agree to help bring this money down? Yes. Did you later agree to do some other kinds of illegal work with Vasquez? Yes. What? We invested in a submarine load together and the train company. When you say submarine and train, what were you shipping? Cocaine. With whom? With Alfredo and, Chapo. You testified earlier that Tirso, the man you met in his ranch, El Centenario, told you in connection with this train route in New York and Chicago that the thing with the oil fell. Do you remember that? Yes. You said you didn't know what that meant at the time? Correct. Did you later find out what Tirso meant by that? Yes. Through whom? Through Alfredo. What did Alfredo tell you? that he was some sort of partner with Tirso in that train business, and that he had helped him set up certain companies, and that they were moving it using some kind of vegetable oil or olive oil. Where were they moving it? To Chicago and New York? From? From Mexico. Did Alfredo ever show you any documentary evidence about this? Yes, in his office he pulled out a stack of paperwork. He said that some of the companies were still under his name, for that reason that he thought that the US government was still looking for him. Now, did you have any conversations with Alfredo about whether Tirso would be able to pay you back for the money that you had lent him? Yes. What did Alfredo tell you?
Take that
He said
L.
he was having some. Who is he? That Tirso was having financial problems and that he was a big time gambler. What would he gamble? What did Alfredo say that Tirso was gambling? Cockfights, horse races. He played a lot of poker.
Anything he could put
Did
money
you ever
down
wind
on.
up talking to somebody else about a drug debt that they had with Tirso? Yes. With whom? One of my associates, Tomas Arevalo. I want to talk about someone different. Did you ever talk to someone who acknowledged that Tirso had in fact paid on a drug debt? Oh, yes. Who is that? Mayo Zambada. What did Mayo tell you? After I met him, I was still feeling a little funny about the situation that Tirso robbed me for around $2 million. I was curious to see, what his status was in the cartel. I asked Mayo if he knew Tirso. What did Mayo say? Mayo acknowledged that he knew him. He referenced him as Fletro. What does that mean? One who transports. What did Mayo say that Tirso had done for Mayo? He told me he had guaranteed the cocaine shipment. You keep saying he. Tirso guaranteed him the cocaine shipments. Tirso guaranteed whom the cocaine shipments? Mayo. And that if he lost anything, that he would pay each kilo at $20,000 a kilo, which was already outrageous to me. Why? A high price to pay, What did Mayo tell you happened after Tirso had guaranteed his work at $20,000? I asked him, so what happened? He said he lost it, and... I'm sorry, you keep saying he. Mayo said, I asked him what happened with Tirso, and he said he lost. Tirso lost the cocaine, and he paid me. That was the last time I've seen him. That's what Mayo is telling you? Yes. You tell...
So Tirso was literally borrowing from Peter to pay Mayo. So right there, he got evidence and proof that the man pays the men upstairs. He's there on his issue with his money. Boom. It's just dudes like the Flores twins he wasn't trying to pay. My question is, what resolution had the twins come to get their money back from Tirso? Just asking about it all over the place, or did they put a bag on his head?
Testified you were getting cocaine shipments consistently from Chapo and Mayo from 2005 to 2008. Who else were you receiving cocaine shipments from? From Alfredio, Damaso, Alfredo Vasquez. What about someone connected to Chapo and Mayo? Vicente Zambada. Let's talk about Vicente Zambada. You were receiving shipments from him as well? Yes. Was there another person or group that was connected to Chapo and Mayo? Yes. Who is that? Arturo Beltran Leyva. Did you ever meet him in person? No. Did you ever have any contact with him? Yes. What kind of contact? Telephone contact. How did you wind up getting supplied cocaine through Arturo Beltran Leyva? I was introduced to one of his lieutenants, which kind of informed me that I had been recommended by Chapo. Did you at some point have a conversation with Chapo Guzman about whether it was okay for you to be purchasing cocaine from Arturo Beltran Leyva? Yes. What did he say? To try to make money. So would you say that your cocaine supply increased or decreased after you met Chapo Guzman and Mayo Zambada in 2005?
Absolutely increased.
It increased. Did you meet Chapo Guzman again? Yes. Was there an incident with a cocaine load that happened shortly after you met Mayo and Chapo for that first time? Yes. What happened? There was a seizure of cocaine, 398 kilos. Where was that seizure? Bloomington, Illinois. Where in Illinois is that? I think it's like 2 hours away outside of Chicago. I'm circling Illinois. In that state? Yes. So what happened? So this was our first shipment that we're going to load after we met Chapo in Mayo.
Bad way to make a first impression.
You talked about a 500 plus shipment. What is the difference between that 500 plus shipment that you got from the Huancho and Herman and this 398 kilo shipment? That shipment was given to us by one of the carriers. It was already in Chicago. So when you say this was the first shipment that you were receiving, what do you mean by that? Directly from them. We were supposed to unload these semi-tractor trailers with the cocaine. What happened in Bloomington, Illinois? The truck was pulled over and law enforcement seized 398 kilos. How did you learn that? Because 2 of my workers were arrested at a warehouse in Chicago. Once you learned about that seizure, did you have to go somewhere? Yes. Tell us what happened. I had to give proof of that seizure and go back to see Chapo and Olivares and Vicente Zambada to discuss whose fault it was.
As far as they're concerned, it's never going to be their fault. It's always going to be your fault. Doesn't matter what happened. Doesn't matter how much explaining you to go in there and do, and none of that. It's on you.
I had to give proof of that seizure and go back to see Chapo and Olivares and Vicente Zambada to discuss whose fault it was. You said Vicente Zambada. Why was he involved? It was both their cocaine. Did you meet with Chapo, Vicente Zambada, and Olivares? Yes. This was when? June, July 2005. You were asked to obtain something before you met with these individuals? Some kind of proof of the drug, that these drugs were seized? What is the significance of obtaining proof the drugs were seized?
Anybody could
To
just
see whose
snatch them.
fault it was, to make sure nobody was just ripping them off? What, if anything, were you able to obtain? The criminal complaint in that case. What did you do with that complaint? I took it to them to show it to them. To who? Chapo and Vicente Zambada and Olivares, Juancho. What was Chapo's reaction when you showed him the complaint? They were happy with it. What do you mean they were happy with it? They acknowledged that it wasn't our fault. We were clear of having to pay anything back for it. What did he want you to do? Continue the business. Continue to do business? What kind of business? Receive these drug shipments. Let's flash forward now to the end of that year, December 2005. What happened then? My father was kidnapped. How did you attempt to resolve this kidnapping? I went to see Chapo. What conversation did you have about this kidnap? I explained to him that I believed that.
This is something that we did not hear about in the 50 Cent produced Surviving El Chapo podcast. We ain't hear nothing about their father being kidnapped. So this is new info as far as what we've been covering.
Lupe Ledesma was behind this kidnapping.
Looks like Tio
Why did you
Lupe
think
did
that?
it.
Because the kidnappers were asking for me for 6.6 million, something like that. What about the amount the kidnappers were asking you caused to think that this was Lupe Ledesma? Lupe Ledesma owed $10 million to Chapo. After me paying off that $4 million debt, I figured he owed around $6 million. It was weird, just the 6.6, it sounded weird to me.
Back when Peter was in the basement being malnourished and starved to death, Jay jumped on a plane, went to the mountain, met Chapo. Chapo told him somebody owes me $10 million. Turns out Lupe had thrown the twins under the bus for the $10 million. After their operation was compromised in Chicago and he wouldn't shut down the pipeline, they ended up losing more money, so he went and he put all that debt on them. They paid the $4 million, and because Peter was looking like he was gonna die on their watch, the person above Lupe Ledesma let Peter out, sent him home after they paid $4 million and dropped a bunch of jewelry on him and stuff. This $6 million and this kidnapping of their father, they believe it was Lupe.
So where did you see Chapo this third time? The mountain. Did you bring him a present? Yes. What did you bring him? A pair of jean shorts and a Viagra box. You said a Viagra box? Yes, a box. It looked like a Viagra box. What was his reaction? He laughed. At this meeting or other meetings, did you meet any of Chapo Guzman's secretaries? Yes. What does that mean to you, secretary of Chapo Guzman? He carried phones for him and he had a bunch of radios and phones, someone who takes care he would make calls from. He was like his voice on the phone. Do you remember the name of this secretary that you saw? Yes. Who was it? Chinacate. Chinacate? Yes. Do you remember what he looked like? He was a redhead. Getting back to the meeting, you hand Chapo Guzman the present of the shorts. What else did you and Chapo discuss besides this issue of your father's kidnapping? I don't. Did you talk about objection? Let's start with the. He's going to refresh him. It's okay. What else did you and Chapo talk about relating to the kidnapping? It was my belief that it was Lupe, which he agreed. He said to me to negotiate whatever I had to do with the kidnappers, try to get my dad back under any means, you
See, they keep going to talk to Chapo about these kidnappings, and Chapo's like, hey man, figure it out. That's your problem. Basically, he's not there to rescue you.
know? Were you successful in negotiations initially? No. So what ultimately happened? Chapo sent me someone, Pocos Pelos. How do you know that Chapo sent you this guy, Pocos Pelos? Because he told me Pocos Pelos came. I met him in Guadalajara, and he came and told me he was going to need a bunch of things from me. What things? Some vehicles, some guns, money. And did you provide Pocos Pelos with any of these items? Yes. Did you provide him with all of the items that Pocos Pelos requested? No, I didn't have the guns that he needed.
Of
All the guns he
course
needed.
not. Of course
How
she
did you
didn't have
resolve this issue
guns. You
by
guys
providing
don't
Pocos
do
Pelos with all
guns
of the guns that he
or
needed?
violence.
I spoke with Chapo and he told me, don't worry about it. I'm going to send someone to you. Just receive it. And did you receive something? Yes. What? It was a vehicle. I had set up the drop in my house. The guys drove a local pickup. It was escorted by a federal police car. A federal police car? Yes. And what was in the pickup truck? There was a stash compartment in it, and he showed me how to open it. Who showed you? The courier, the guy who drove the pickup to my house. He showed me how to open it. I opened it. There was about 25, 30 AR-15s in the stash. What else? You said it was escorted by a police car. What was in the police car that Chapo sent? It was a bunch of logos for the federal police. You say logos. What do you mean by that?
All right. So I'll take it back. Evidently, Chapo sent him some people, some hammers to, try to go get his father. It's a little bit more than figured out, but I mean, he's telling them negotiate, do whatever you got to do to get your father. He told him the same thing with Peter, so I don't understand it.
Like badges, stickers, like that represented the federal police in Mexico, the AFI. And what did you do with those badges? I helped iron them on a bunch of uniforms, black uniforms. Who did you turn those uniforms over to? To Pocos Pelos and the 20-25 men they had sent with them. Now, you mentioned that you had obtained. Did you obtain some vehicles as well? Yes. What was the issue? Was there an issue with the vehicles? Yes, there was. What was that? One of my associates recommended that I get these stolen vehicles, which I thought was not a problem. But what happened once you got these stolen vehicles? Somehow, I guess Pocos Pelos or one of them reported back to Chapo that they were stolen.
Yo,
Did
like,
Chapo
what
reach
are
out
you
to you?
doing?
Yes, he was upset because the vehicles were stolen. He kind of reprimanded me about it. He said no innocent should get hurt or take a loss because of something like this. We can buy the vehicles new.
Yo, these dudes be just cutting corners in the stupidest ways. I don't even understand it. He sent you to get him cars. I put heat on him with a whole stolen fleet.
What did he say? For me to buy the vehicles brand new if I had to, but not to do that again. Was there another concern about the fact that his people would be driving around in stolen vehicles? Did he express to you? Yes, that they could be in a situation with law enforcement putting them in danger. Sir, what happened next?
All right, y'all, we're going to stop there. We're going to pick up on episode 3 in a couple of days, and we're going to talk about Chapo Squad with Pocos Pelos down there with the twins kidnapping Lupe and his sons, and we'll see how it goes from there. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Peace.